So Jesse started working in 3D during high school, where he learned to work with AutoCAD in an architecture class. My first like real dive into 3D was probably Rhino, like a computer tech class. I think that was in like 2002 or 2003. After that, I went to college and received a degree in game design. The degree was very broad, teaching me all aspects of game design. That's usually how it goes. Um, and where was I at? The degree was very broad, teaching me all aspects of game design. So I did everything from coding, story writing, and sound design, but ultimately fell in love with 3D. That's also a nice thing about going broad like that. It does take up your time when you could be focusing on one specific thing, right? But you get to experience all of the departments, which kind of leads into this territory of like, what do I like? By being able to touch all of those departments, you can kind of figure it out, which is really nice. Also, I love your profile picture. There's some great energy going on there. Um, you ultimately fell in love with 3D, graduated in 2021, and produced 5 games during my time at college, all of which involved working with classmates in different specialties of the program. The biggest being a class of 30 people. That is bigger than some indie companies. I've been working in an unrelated field while I've been bolstering my 3D skills, as I'd like to work in AAA industry, and my skills after graduating were not up to par. I imagine mainly because you're going very broad, right? I'm primarily training towards hard surface in or environment art. Cool. So we can look at like we'll look at like where your environment art is at right now and stuff that I feel like you could probably work on to turn up the quality. So your second answer or your second question, um, let's see here. Your second question or the second answer to my question was, I'm not sure exactly what I would like to pursue. However, I enjoy hard surface modeling, including props, weapons, and some environment pieces. With my background in gaming, I would like to work in that space again. However, I am more so excited to break out into the industry any way possible and start my path as a 3D artist, whether that be by doing product renderings, ArcViz, or any other route that isn't gaming. So just want to get your teeth into 3D. Ripper or Ripper? Why is it Ripper? Ripped? Is this you? Ripped bread? Is this the man, the myth, the legend? It is nice. Okay, cool. If you have any questions, don't fret. Just ask away in chat. Uh, I'd like to get some feedback on my portfolio, on how my portfolio reads. Uh, what are your impressions of me as an artist are and how I present my work? Things such as too many breakdowns, not enough materials are my weakest skill, closely followed by composition and lighting. So you think your materials, your composition and lighting are your weakest. That's really interesting to know, actually. However, I haven't made a piece attempting to showcase composition or lighting really. Um, I can just from the thumbnails, there's something there, and so we can talk about that. So you just finished a small interior environment piece and would like to expand into making a larger modular environment. I believe I'm at a point where I know the programs and workflow enough to not worry about modeling and texturing and dive into composition and creating whole works of art. I like that you look at it like that, whole works of art. That's cool. I don't have an exact idea of what I would like to do, but this is my next big goal, and possibly doing a small, easy prop to practice materials again is between that. Yeah, so it sounds like focusing on your materials and focusing on composition are the big things, right? Now, what's really interesting is you can actually work on composition without completing any art. Like you can just use blockouts and frame those blockouts and be like, hey, does this look interesting? And that's like compositionally, people can then just be critiquing composition. You can do light positioning and all that stuff, and really get those to kind of be the kind of the target you're aiming for and where you're trying to get feedback. You can also, yes, use pre-made assets and just like build a small scene focusing just on composition, just on your lighting and like storytelling and stuff like that. So let's look at your portfolio. So you're saying hard surface slash props artist. So when I look at the thumbnails here, right now the thumbnails are pretty, like, I would say they're kind of everywhere. They're focusing on different things, right? And because the colors are all a little different from each other, that can get a little jarring. And then you have like, this one is following a different format from all of these. So there's like, you've got like a top edge and a bottom edge, and then some text that's quite big. And then a car floating in nothingness is how I would best describe the thumbnail without, I'm not trying to be rude or anything, of course. But like, even see how close you've zoomed in on the Honda generator. If you were to zoom in on a part of the car like that, all of a sudden this thumbnail blends right in with these three here. Even like this scene, when we click on that, we can look into that and see what's going on there, and see if there's something else we can focus on to try and really pop the scene out a bit more. But same with this revolver. I don't even know if you need the text on there, because when you mouse over it, you get the text, right? Getting a zoom in of like the barrel and just the casings, those details alone up close would be strong. So let's see how old some of this stuff is, because this one's 2 years old, also extremely low poly. I'm actually surprised when I look at it up here. Initial reaction is you don't really feel like it's as low poly as you were expecting, and then you see this and you're like, oh, okay, that is really low. And then you go back up, you look, and you're like, okay, I can see. What you want to do is avoid the hard edges. Of course, it's 2 years ago, so we won't look at this too hard. See, and this is quite interesting. This shows me that you were pretty fresh to like trying to figure out how to do this type of modeling. Looking at references of the real deal of like this vehicle itself, this Miata, understanding where seams are and how to separate panels. Just when you do sub D, or when you're modeling like high poly assets, they don't all need to be a single mesh. They can be separated into the parts that kind of make sense for how it would be put together if it was real, right? So when you look at the poly count here, that's fine. We're talking sub D. You're just trying to get the most benefit out of sub D, which is actually getting smooth edges, smoother curves and whatnot, right? So by these being separated, you get the benefit of not only the smooth curves, but also the cavities where they split and it kind of dips in, and you get these nice like inner creases. Looking at this area, this line here, man, I wish ArtStation needs to add this, where you can just click that and drag it back and forth, because I'd love to do compare images in the way you present on ArtStation. That's where I would love to see like how you're thinking about these areas, because right now there's a lot of like, you want to be careful with pinching or long triangles, as those tend to lead to like weird shading in the way that the lighting is received across the geometry. This is great to see. It's funny because I feel like a lot of the times I want to see more of this map, or I want to see more of this map, but I'm only getting a sliver. So I'd prefer all of them being like just laid out in like a single image. What is it? There's five maps here. So you could do like 2 at the top, 3 at the bottom, or 3 at the top, 2 at the bottom, just so we can see more. I think that would be great. I need to contact ArtStation. I feel like we always have these like weird ideas that make sense for how you view people's work. So we'll go to the revolver now. So this one's last year, and this is definitely a step up in the quality of your previous work. And again, like if I double click on, oh right, if I double click, it just zooms right on in. Let's go here to the inspector, and we'll just look at the wireframe here. So with the wireframe here, there's quite a bit of geometry happening in this area, and this can I mean, you're never gonna get this close, really. Let me see what's going on here. I say never, and then I'm like in here. So okay, so the rounds are actually in there, aren't they? Yes, they are. Hello. That's freaking cool. Enhance. So there's a lot of geometry, like a lot of extra loops that likely don't need to be here in order to sell the look of this. Same with the hammer. I think it's the hammer for the revolver. This does not need to be nearly as high poly, and all of your bakes should be able to hold up on this the fidelity here. So it is about a little bit about cutting down on your geometry when possible, just to kind of cheapen it up a little bit when it comes to how much geo you're using to sell something. But then I would say the next thing is the texturing, understanding how this surface reads. Like there's some information that feels like it's going vertical here in the material itself. Maybe that's the roughness. Like if we go to your roughness here, no, your roughness is actually pretty simplified. Let me look at your metalness. So in your metalness map, this should all be white, and like any areas that you want to have like not metal or like implied dirt, just make those black. Try not to have any gray values in here yet. That'll change as we start looking into materials through like substrate, or like as we start getting more complicated shading setups, or shading models rather. But right now we're not really there. So it's usually best to just have like in your metalness map to have the contrast of either black or white. You can have the little noise, just make sure that that noise is black. So when it comes to your normal information, this generally looks okay. Usually I don't really judge a normal map in this way. Usually I look at it through other, like a flat view, just to see like baking issues. Bring on the metalness, grayness discourse. My God. So specular, when in doubt with specular, 0.5 value across the board is the best option. That is what they do for Unreal, unless you tell it something else in the material inputs. Vertex color, okay, yeah. So in your base color, this is where the information's coming in. So there's some like directional information that's happening in here. And a lot of it is like, it looks like you're trying to describe a lot of stuff that would be happening actually in the roughness. So this is a common mistake that you'll see with people that are building their materials, is knowing, can I press 2? And ooh, oh, that's nice. Okay. Anyways, yeah. So looking at your color and your roughness, a lot of the information in your color should go into your roughness, like the directionality scratches and whatnot. That will really enhance the quality of the surface that you're trying to portray. And figuring out the roughness, like the general averaged value of what the roughness should be for this material, is going to be really important. Another thing too is when you're looking at metals, the base color tends to be quite bright. And it's only when they become dielectric, if I remember correctly. If they're dielectric, then they tend to have some colors in them. So like copper, for example, will have a color in the base color. But yeah, the readability of this type of information, right now what you're seeing in the final render is this feels a lot more like stone or concrete. But if instead of that being in the albedo, if it was in the roughness, all of a sudden now it's like a different surface attribute that's happening. And if your metalness map is white, then it should be color. And that to me tells me, when you look at this final render here, that it's probably not reflective enough. Like the roughness probably just needs to be darker. But there's a lot of details that need to be enhanced on here when it comes to the way you're viewing your materials. But this is last year, so we can let's move on and just see like where things have gotten to with your work. So this one is an antique machete. Is there brand new machetes? I swear every time I see a machete, it's antique or it's very old. It looks like it's chopped down entire jungles, to get to people's portfolios. Let's take a peek. Watching people improve. They just stopped making them? Oh, okay. So right off of the bat, this surface is really intriguing. And I love the little I love what's happening with the handle there. There's so much more information happening. Can you do detail normals in Sketchfab? Man, I should dig into Sketchfab more so I can really understand like how you can push your work through Sketchfab. Let's see here. I'm just going to double click here. This is another thing I really like about Sketchfab is you can focus in on the area with a double click and then just kind of rotate around. So with this material work, your roughness has definitely gotten more, what is it, engaging? You see the range that's happening inside of the roughness here. You don't think? Okay. Dang. Okay. Okay. This is also really nice because you have the metal going through the handle or the hilt. I don't know. Is it hilt? Would it be hilt? I don't know. Anyways, the roughness difference between these is really nice. And with the metalness, this is where we get into the weird territory again. So I know that in this render, it's quite rusted or it's quite dirty and aged. A lot of your work is getting lost in the normal map information and the type of material you're going for. So try not to put normal map information that is extruding outwards unless this was painted. It would usually go inwards and be damaged to the metal, right? But like we look at the metal and it just needs to be, I would say, a little bit less rusted so that you can really benefit from it being metal. Like this edge here, I would really expose that, sharpened to all hell to expose the metalness. And I would do more to show the metalness along edge, like that glint you're talking about. The metal bit in the handle, like just shing, you know, that sound, you can hear it just by looking at it. Something to focus on. But yeah, we look at your normal maps. There's a lot of normal information going on in here, and a lot of it is outward detail. Remember that the surface is more inwards when it gets damaged, right? Unless it's like paint on top, like I was saying earlier. So something to keep in mind there. Let's look at the wireframe. Looks a lot more friendly. This is pretty clean as well, trying to keep the, you've got some edges here, which is good. And then you're, instead of just connecting it here and here, you're trying to keep the triangles a little less like crazy long. So that's really nice. There's some detail here that's maybe like this needs to be UV'd. It feels very strange to see that. And then this edge loop in here can probably just be part of the normal map. You probably don't need that loop in there. And yeah, just trying to see what else we can, there's some directional information that's happening on here that feels very short, but repeated. So it's kind of hard to tell what it is, or if it's just like a, you know, a marking that you keep doing. And it's just an artifact of like how you've textured your asset. There's a weird light spot there. What's going on there? Is that your, that might be a little bit of your roughness information bleeding into your albedo again. So like that color doesn't need to be there. And because of how you've done your roughness, you can see it's doing the work for you. Like there's information happening there. You don't really need the strange color to kind of like push the, because I can't really just explain like what that color is, you know. But let's keep moving on here. So we got your poker set. This actually, I remember reviewing this before, and it's pretty cool. The bevels, I would say we should make bevels larger. Careful with these like really tiny triangles here. I think I can just zoom in, maybe, yeah. It's little tiny triangles that are happening here. Watch out for those. Other things are looking pretty good. This bevel could be wider just so that it's not so sharp when you see it in the render. It feels like it might be a little too sharp. But generally speaking, the materials are looking pretty good. This surface is supposed to be a little bit more velvety, and that can get really strange when it comes to like how you do that. It depends on the engine, of course. You're in Marmoset, so maybe there's a velvet shader that's in there that you can lean on. But there's a lot of the same renders with the wireframes. I think you only need to show the wireframe once, and maybe like one of the chips up close. Yeah, getting a felt feel is extremely difficult if it's just your metallic map, your roughness, and your like. You can get a little bit of the felt feel, I guess, by applying a felt like noise inside of a Fresnel. It seems to alternate. I think it's intentional. The wood marks goes up with one, and on the left and goes left to right. You're talking about these little things here, or these lines. Displacement plus normal should lift it. Ah, interesting, dropping. But you mean displacing the surface? Because the black marks, I think those are intentional. I read those as two separate wood pieces. Because like each one of them's it's like a really interesting attention to detail. Yeah, the wood grain. Thanks, Avi. And Popular. I'll call you Snowman. But yeah, I wonder. Droppy says, yeah, designer has this tiler with looks like worms. Perhaps try using that as height. Oh, interesting. Looks like worms. You should ask in the Discord for like, hey, how would you guys make a velvet material? Like what maps are needed for that? And you'll probably get people talking about all these different techniques for how they would do velvet or felt. Because velvet or like satin's weird. Satin is one of those materials where I kind of feel like you need gray metalness, but I don't know. You know, it's kind of, but yeah, there's a lot of scrolling in here. I would love to see some texture flats. You only need to show the wireframes in one image, and I would say leave it at that. The handle is probably the only other thing I would mention. Is it feels just a tad too pristine, and just doesn't feel grounded because of it. And maybe it's because the wood is feeling strange. Like if each one of these pieces were a different roughness, just slightly from each other, that might do the trick. Because then you get some differences, and you see that highlight there. Just getting some variation in that, because we're not seeing any of the maps in here for like how you put this all together. So that's something to keep in mind. And then we got this bad boy, the Honda generator. Let's take a gander. So, inspection time. So first of all, let's look at the wireframes. So geometry is high-ish. It depends what you want to show. Yeah, this is pretty high. Like these could be quite simplified. Let's go to like a lighter wireframe so we can see what's going on. There's a lot of geo here. Like that definitely does not have to happen for you to make this. Even in a cinematic asset for games, at least, you don't need to add that much detail. If I press 5, does it just toggles it on and off? Ooh, that's learning things every day. Yeah, poly count wise, it's actually not all that crazy. It's just there's a few areas where you're like, you have to ask yourself, do you actually need that loop? Do you actually need that extra loop? Like here, like I would argue you might not even need that geometry because it's clipping through there. And with that off, we almost don't even notice, you know? That could just be melted into it. Um, let's take a look at your, so we got a base color here. Base color looks pretty good. The red might be too saturated. So there's a balance when you're looking at your base colors of making sure it's not too saturated and it's not too low or high in value. And to me, this feels quite saturated. Your metals look pretty good. They might even err on the oh no, I'm gonna make you guys yawn. They might even be just a hair too dark. But if we look at your metalness maps, this looks pretty good. Maybe a little bit more contrast of like between the, just trying to get rid of the grayer values. And then when we look at your roughness, this roughness looks pretty nice. There's a lot of information going on in there. And it's like, think about it like this. When you do your roughness pass, you make sure that like you get the roughness about where it should, about where it feels right for that type of material. So you're like, okay, what's the paint look like? What's the plastics look like? Rubber materials, getting all those, they get tuned to just the right range and roughness for what you're trying to go for. And then from there, then it's, how do I dirty this up? What does dirt do to it? Like, how does, what, not dirt, literally dirt, but like, how does it become dirty? Like, is it fingerprints? Is it like the paint gets like smudges of grease from fingers and oil and stuff? Because those have a different type of roughness, right? That type of smudging. And that smudging looks different on a tire. So if you want the tire to look dirty, what makes a tire look dirty? And that's how you kind of think about layering your roughness and pushing those details further and further. Like a lot of the like cakiness that you've got going on in here with like how you've kind of controlled your roughness is doing some work in here, but you can see it's very subtle. Like it's very, very subtle. So maybe it's just a matter of like pushing the range a little bit further. So thinking about that, when I say range, you've got your average value here for what you want your metal to look like, or your painted metal surface. Is this painted? I don't think so. I think this is actually, no, this is paint because it's black in the metalness. So if that's paint, this dirtiness should go up in value to portray the dirtiness that's happening on the paint, right? And the scratches, those scratches, maybe those expose the metal, and then those scratches would be a white scratch in the metalness. And now you're getting much more like surface play when it comes to like how the lighting is being received across the surfaces. But yeah, overall, like in here, that's looking pretty nice. That's looking pretty good. And it is definitely, it's more about how your surface is rendering overall. Like that's why this feels strange to me, is because it's just too saturated. Also, these outlets, are those upside down, or is that actually how they are? Because to me, those feel upside down. It's interesting. Yeah, see, those scratches would be way more visible if metalness was exposed in there. And you get all this like, you can see there's all this dirt on here, but the roughness edge, this highlight here, is not changing whatsoever. Like that should get much wider up here because the roughness of the dirt. They are, but how they are on the actual, wow, that's crazy. Okay. That is how they are supposed to be. Many people install outlets incorrectly. Oh, that's hilarious. If that's the case. Oh man, my whole life is a lie. I was like, okay, I'm moving to Sweden. I can't handle these outlets. Holy cow, look at that wireframe. So wireframes for sub D models or high poly models we don't really need to see them. What we want to see is the low poly model with the bake on it. If that looks good, if the bake looks good, you're golden. Yeah. This is also really intriguing. It's interesting to see how you're packing stuff. And you're listing the maps in order. It's also a 4K. All right. Cool. Getting an asset, if you can get an asset to look this good with a 1024, that would be, because you could use a 1024 for all of the text and these like lines and stuff. You use a 1024 for just that and then float those as like floating geometry with alpha cutout. And that's one way to lower the resolution really easily. Because you need the res right now, I imagine, to get the text to be visible and legible, right? Separating those out, that starts to fix stuff as far as like how much you can control your resolution. Cool. Okay, I think we've got, what is it? One last piece, no? Yeah. So the simple dining room. So this room is pretty cool. There's some, I feel magic, the edge of magic here. Floaters. Yes, Bray. Geometric floaters, okay? Don't forget to flush. Gross. This, dope. There's something going on here. I think it's the roughness. Feels good. Feels good. What is feeling really strange to me are the shadows. The shadows are so sharp that it's like cutting, it's like laser cut shadows. And this is rendered in a Marmoset tool bag as well, which is even more intriguing to me. Oh, see right here? There's something going on here. I feel like I do like that this feels like a normal person's house and not an ArcViz house. There is definitely something to be said about that one. There are multiple light sources which are causing some weirdness. So it feels kind of like a lighting, like a setup of lighting. We're getting ready to do a serious interview with one person. Yeah, maybe even a camera flash a little bit. But this shot feels super nice. I think if you were to get a little bit of a roughness difference in the grain, just very, very subtle, it'll show up, as well as like these little marks. Those are nice. But I think where this is falling down is because it's in Marmoset tool bag. Because like in here, it's feeling like this is feeling pretty good. It still feels a little unlit. I don't know if I can. Yeah, oh yeah, you can move the light around. There we go. So see, the shadows are pretty dull. They're not too dark. So there's not a lot of contrast going on to help separate and like give you space. Moonhunter, correction, the National Electrical Code, the NEC, doesn't offer a definitive answer on the correct way to install outlets. So you do you. You want to plug it in upside down? That's your right side up. Yeah, there's some stuff going on here. Like one little more. Little bit of shading issues going on here in the normal. I think that's geometric and not normal map based, but it's hard to tell. But yeah, I want you to put this in Unreal. I want you to put this in Unreal because I think that's where you could really get some of this stuff to shine, and you could get some good detail normal information on there to try and help like really push these surfaces. Yeah, I see we're getting some compression stuff going on here as well in your roughness. I think that Sketchfab is really good, and it can render assets very, very well. But I think when you start to build a scene, it gets a little bit more complicated. And yeah, dramatic lighting will go a long, long way. Dramatic lighting would be sick in here. Like that shot, that one I was just looking at. This one, that's dramatic. Look at the range that's going on in this shot of like light to dark. And then in these shots, the range just isn't, it feels flatter, you know? Dramatic lighting. You've not heard of that before? Is that, are you being sarcastic or for real? Yeah, because lighting being dramatic can really help like pop details. Sky, you're what? Really? Hang on, hang on. I think we went through your Sky. Am I wrong? No, no, we didn't. You're next. You're next. But yeah, I think getting this into Unreal and pushing your surfaces is going to be, that's the next hotness, because I'm confident in your modeling skills. They're looking pretty good, and it's about pushing those materials just a little bit further forward. Very nice. So yeah, what I would do is continue to work on keeping your modeling relatively optimized, thinking about real-time rendering, right? Start getting comfortable in Unreal. If you need, maybe a intro to Unreal course would be helpful, a free one even. Yeah. We'll talk about that later. But materials, getting into Unreal, and keeping an eye on your geometry, and showing us your texture flats like separated so we can see what's going on. And yes, what Polysocks is talking about, William Fauscher does a really good lighting for beginners on Unreal Engine 5. But yeah, cool. If you have any other questions, just poke me and we can discuss that. We have our chat as well that that I set up for this portfolio review. So I set up a chat for each portfolio review. Thank you, Polysocks, as well for the link. And yeah, good stuff.